"Go and walk again," said the blind girl to the paralyzed man, and then it happened. Richard Thompson was sitting in his wheelchair on the sidewalk outside Mercy General Hospital in Denver when a little girl about 10 years old approached him. His granddaughter Emma was trying to push the chair to the car, but the elderly man had asked to stop for a few minutes to get some fresh air after yet another frustrating doctor's appointment. The girl wore dark glasses and held a white cane in her left hand. With her right, she reached out and gently touched Richard's arm. "You're very sad," she said in a sweet but determined voice. "I can feel it." Emma, 17, immediately stepped between her grandfather and the stranger. "I'm sorry, but we're busy," the teenager said, trying to be polite but firm. "Wait, Emma," Richard interrupted, intrigued by the child. "How do you know I'm sad?" The girl smiled faintly. "My name is Olivia. I lost my sight when I was 7, but since then I've been able to sense things other people don't notice. And you've lost hope, haven't you?" Richard felt a tightness in his chest. For 3 years and 4 months, he had been in that wheelchair after a car accident that damaged his spinal cord. The doctors had been clear. He would never walk again. "How can a child know these things?" Emma muttered, suspicious. Olivia held Richard's hand firmly. "Go and walk again," she said, looking directly into his eyes through the dark glasses. "I know you can." "Sweetheart, the doctors already said it's impossible," Richard replied, but there was something in Olivia's voice that made him want to believe. "My mom always told me that when she was a physical therapist, she had a patient the doctors said the same thing about." He walked again after 2 years. Emma took a deep breath. "Your mom's a physical therapist." "Was," Olivia corrected, lowering her head. "She doesn't work anymore. She had some problems and now cleans offices at night." Richard studied the girl carefully. There was a determination in her posture that reminded him of himself when he was younger, when he built his construction materials company from the ground up. "Why do you think I can walk again?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because when I touched your hand, I felt something different, like an energy that's asleep, waiting to wake up. My mom taught me that sometimes the body knows things the mind has forgotten." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. A week later, Richard couldn't stop thinking about Olivia's words. He lived in a large house in the Cherry Hills neighborhood with his daughter-in-law Catherine and Emma. His wife Jennifer had passed away 5 years earlier, even before the accident, a victim of cancer that devastated the whole family. Catherine was in the kitchen preparing lunch when Richard asked, "Do you know how we could find that girl we met at the hospital?" "Grandpa, for heaven's sake," Emma sighed. "You're still thinking about that? I can't get what she said out of my head. What if she's right?" Catherine dried her hands on a towel and walked over. "Dad, I understand your hope, but we don't want you to face another disappointment. We've already seen so many specialists. She said her mom was a physical therapist. Maybe we could try something different." "You already did physical therapy for 2 years, Catherine argued. "It didn't help. But not with her mom." Emma rolled her eyes, but deep down she was worried about her grandfather. Since the accident, he had lost so much of his old enthusiasm for life. The company he had built was being managed by his partner, Michael Reynolds, while Richard sank deeper into silent depression. "If this will make you feel better, I can try to find her," offered Emma. "But promise me you won't get your hopes up too high." "I promise." The next day, Emma returned to the hospital and asked some staff members about a blind girl who used to come around. One nurse remembered her. "Oh, Olivia. She comes here sometimes with her mother, Sarah. Her mother works cleaning some medical offices nearby. You might find them in the late afternoon at the commercial building on Maple Avenue." When Emma arrived at the building, she found a woman around 40 years old mopping a hallway floor. Olivia was sitting in a chair doing her homework in Braille. "Excuse me, are you Sarah?" The woman looked up, tired. "Yes. Is there a problem?" No. "Actually, your daughter met my grandfather at the hospital last week. She said some interesting things." Sarah looked at Olivia, who had stopped her homework. "Olivia, what have you been saying?" "Mom, I just said I felt the man could walk again." Sweetheart, we've talked about this. You can't go around giving people false hope. Emma stepped closer. Actually, my grandfather was very interested. He'd like to talk to you about physical therapy. Sarah sighed and stopped cleaning. Young lady, I don't do that anymore. I had some issues. Now I do what I can to support my daughter. What kind of issues? Sarah hesitated before answering. A very influential doctor here in town spread word that my methods weren't scientific. Said I was giving false hope to terminal patients. I lost my license and my reputation. No clinic would hire me after that. Olivia stood and walked to her mother, holding her hand. Mom, but you helped so many people. Remember Mr. Paul and Mrs. Mary? That was a long time ago, sweetheart. Emma sensed there was a deeper story here. My grandfather's name is Richard Thompson. Maybe you've heard of him. He owns a construction materials company. Sarah completely stopped what she was doing. Thompson Building Solutions, the one who had the accident a few years ago? Exactly. I tried reaching out to him when I heard about the accident, offered my services, but the office said he already had a physical therapist. Olivia perked up. Mom, then you can meet him. Olivia, it's not that simple. Emma noticed the tension and decided to be more direct. Why did you specifically want to help my grandfather? Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Emma. Because your grandfather, without knowing it, once helped our family. 3 days later, Richard was sitting in his living room when Emma arrived with Sarah and Olivia. Catherine had gone shopping, so they'd have privacy to talk. So you're the physical therapist Olivia mentioned, Richard said, studying Sarah carefully. I was a physical therapist, Sarah corrected, and before we discuss anything, I need to tell you a story. Olivia sat on the floor near Richard's chair, just as she had at the hospital. 5 years ago, Sarah began, my daughter started losing her vision due to a rare degenerative disease. The doctors said there was nothing to be done. I was desperate with no money for experimental treatments abroad. Richard listened intently. One day I was at the bus stop crying after another frustrating appointment when an older man approached me. He asked if I was okay if I needed help. I told him about Olivia's situation, and without even knowing me, he gave me the money for consultations with 2 different specialists. Grandpa, Emma whispered, recognizing the kind of gesture her grandfather had always made. You said you had a daughter Olivia's age, and that if you were in my situation, you'd want someone to help. I never knew his name, but when I saw his photo in the paper after the accident, I recognized him immediately. Richard felt a lump in his throat. He vaguely remembered the incident. It was something he often did, helping people in tough spots. The specialists couldn't save my sight, Olivia said, but they taught me how to live without it. That's why when I found you in the hospital, I felt I had to return the favor somehow. But how can you be sure I can improve? Olivia stood and walked to Richard's chair. May I touch your leg? Richard nodded. She placed her hand gently on his right thigh. See? There's tension here that shouldn't exist if your muscles were completely inactive. My mother taught me to notice these things. Sarah stepped closer. Mr. Thompson, I developed a method combining traditional physical therapy with body awareness exercises. It's not mystical or unscientific. It's based on neuroplasticity, the idea that the body sometimes holds memories that can be reactivated. And why did other doctors say your method doesn't work? Sarah sighed deeply. Because it challenges some egos. There's a very influential doctor here in Denver, Dr. William Porter, who runs an expensive rehab clinic. When my patient started seeing results without paying his exorbitant fees, he launched a campaign to discredit me. Richard knew the name. William Porter. Isn't he friends with Michael? Michael? My business partner, Michael Reynolds. Sarah and Emma exchanged worried glances. Mr. Thompson, Sarah said carefully, is there something you haven't told us about your accident? What do you mean? Was Michael in the car with you? No, I was alone. Why do you ask? Olivia, who had stayed quiet, suddenly moved closer. May I ask a strange question? Do you remember what you were thinking right before the accident? Richard closed his eyes, trying to recall. I was very upset. "I just found out something about Michael that disturbed me." "What was it?" "I'd rather not say." Sarah sat in the chair across from him. "Mr. Thompson, in my experience, emotional trauma can affect physical recovery. I'm not saying your accident was psychological, but sometimes the body holds tension that blocks healing." Emma listened with growing curiosity. "Grandpa, what did you find out about Uncle Michael?" Richard looked at his granddaughter, then at Sarah and Olivia. "Michael had been embezzling from the company for 2 years. I found out the day before the accident. I was on my way to confront him when the truck hit me." Sarah and Olivia shared a meaningful glance. "And did you ever confront Michael after the accident?" "No. When I woke up in the hospital, he was there, handling everything. He seemed so concerned, so devoted. I thought maybe I'd misread the documents." "Or maybe," Olivia said softly, "he took advantage of your condition to keep doing what he was doing." Richard felt a wave of anger mixed with deep chest pain. "Sarah, do you really think you can help me?" "I can't promise anything, but if you're willing, we can try. I'll be honest though. If Dr. Porter finds out I'm working again, he could cause serious trouble for me and Olivia." "Leave Dr. Porter to me," Richard said, with a determination he hadn't felt in years. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The sessions began the following week. Sarah came to Richard's house every morning, always accompanied by Olivia. Catherine was skeptical, but didn't raise any objections. Emma, on the other hand, grew more and more interested in the process. Sarah's method was unlike anything Richard had tried before. Instead of focusing solely on physical exercises, she started each session with breathing and visualization techniques. "Imagine your legs moving," she would say. "Don't force it, just picture it. Let your brain remember what it felt like to walk." Olivia actively participated in the sessions. She had developed an extraordinary sensitivity to touch and could detect subtle changes in muscle tension that even Sarah missed. "Here," she said, placing her hand on Richard's right ankle. "Something's different today." After 2 weeks of work, something strange happened. During a passive mobilization exercise, Richard felt a slight tingling in his left foot. "Sarah," he exclaimed, "I felt something." Sarah stopped immediately. "Are you sure?" "Yes, it was in my left foot when you bent my toes." Olivia beamed. "I knew it. I knew there was something special about you." But when they tried to repeat the exercise, the sensation didn't return. Richard grew frustrated. "Maybe I imagined it." "No," Sarah said firmly. "First rule of rehabilitation: the body never lies. If you felt it, it was real. We just need to figure out how to make it happen again." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He lay staring at his legs, trying to recall what it felt like to move them. For the first time in 3 years, he felt something he'd completely forgotten: hope. The next morning at breakfast, Catherine received an unexpected call. "It was Michael," she said after hanging up. "He wants to come talk to you, Dad. Said it's urgent." Richard felt a mix of anxiety and anger. "What does he want?" He didn't say, only that it's about the company. An hour later, Michael Reynolds arrived at the house. A well-dressed 55-year-old man with a smile, Richard now recognized as insincere. "Richard, my friend, how are you?" "Better than I've been in a long time," Richard replied, studying his partner's face. "Good to hear. Listen, I came because we've received a very interesting offer to sell the company." "Sell?" "Michael, we've never talked about selling." I know. But think about it. You can't work. I'm getting tired of managing everything alone. Maybe it's time to retire and enjoy life." Richard watched Michael closely. Something in his body language didn't match his words. "How much are they offering?" $2.5 million. $2.5 million? Richard nearly shouted. "Michael, our company is worth at least 8. Richard, be realistic. With the economy as it is, and considering you can't work anymore, who's interested in buying?" Michael hesitated. "A group of investors. Serious people." "What group?" "You don't know them." Richard sensed Michael was lying but decided not to press further. "Let me think about it." Of course, but don't take too long. They want an answer by the end of the month." After Michael left, Richard was unsettled. The conversation confirmed his suspicions that his partner wasn't being honest. Sarah and Olivia arrived for the afternoon session and immediately noticed something was wrong. "So you're tense," Olivia observed as soon as she touched his hand. "I had a difficult conversation earlier." "Do you want to talk about it?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes it helps to get things off your chest before exercises." Richard shared about Michael's visit and the buyout offer. "He's trying to get rid of me," he concluded. "He probably already has some under-the-table deal." Olivia approached the wheelchair. "Mr. Thompson, may I make a suggestion?" "Of course, Olivia. Why don't you go to the company tomorrow just to look around, talk to the employees, understand what's really happening?" "Olivia, I haven't left the house in months. And besides, how would I get around there in this chair?" "I can go with you," Emma offered. "I've always wanted to learn more about the family business." Sarah supported the idea. "It might be very good for your emotional state to reconnect with something that was important in your life." The next day, Emma took Richard to the headquarters of Thompson Building Solutions. It was a 3-story building in Denver's commercial district, built by Richard himself 15 years earlier. When they arrived, the receptionist nearly fell off her chair. "Mr. Thompson, what a wonderful surprise," Richard smiled. He had forgotten how good it felt to be warmly welcomed by employees. "Hi, Rebecca. How are things here?" "Oh, you know, we keep working. Mr. Reynolds is in his office. Should I let him know you're here?" "No need. I want to walk around first, talk to the staff." As Emma pushed the wheelchair through the halls, Richard greeted employees he hadn't seen in years, but he also noticed some absences. "Where's Brian from accounting?" he asked one worker. "Oh, he left about 6 months ago. Mr. Reynolds said we were cutting costs. And Deborah from finance? She left too." Richard was growing concerned. Brian and Deborah were long-time, competent employees. Why had Michael let them go? When they reached the second floor, where the finance department was located, Richard asked to see the accounting books for the last 2 years. "Mr. Thompson," the new employee said, "I need Mr. Reynolds' authorization before showing these documents." "Ashley," Richard said calmly, "my name is still on the company door. I'm still the majority shareholder. Bring me the books." As Richard reviewed the documents, Emma watched the office activity. There were far fewer employees than she remembered from the few times she'd visited before the accident. "Grandpa," she whispered, "something's not right here." Richard was reaching the same conclusion. The numbers didn't add up. Contracts he remembered signing weren't recorded. There were exorbitant expenses for consulting he'd never authorized. "Emma, take me to Michael's office, now." When they reached the third-floor office, Michael was on the phone. Seeing Richard, he quickly ended the call. "Richard, what a surprise. You didn't tell me you were coming today." "Michael, we need to talk. Alone." Michael glanced at Emma. "She stays," Richard said firmly. "She's my granddaughter and has a right to know what's happening to the family business." Michael settled into the chair behind the desk, which, Richard noticed, was far more luxurious than any furniture he'd approved. "Michael, where are the records for the Aurora City contracts? Those were 3 major projects we closed last year." "Ah, those contracts? We had some technical issues. They ended up being cancelled." "Cancelled? Michael, those projects were worth over $1 million. Richard, you know how the public sector is, political changes, budget cuts." Richard knew Michael was lying. He'd personally called Aurora's public works secretary 2 months after the accident, and everything had been confirmed. "And the layoffs? Why did you let Brian and Deborah go?" "Cost reduction. With the crisis, we had to downsize." "Michael," Richard said slowly, "do you think I'm a fool?" The atmosphere in the room shifted completely. Michael stood up from his chair. "Richard, where are you going with these questions?" "I want the truth. You've been stealing from our company. How dare you accuse me of—" "I dare because I have proof." Richard slammed his fist on the armrest. "Contracts you never registered, employees you fired to cover irregularities, fake expenses." Michael walked to the window, trying to keep his composure. "Richard, you haven't worked in 3 years. You don't understand how things have changed. I've kept this company running single-handedly. Kept it running or looted it." Emma had been silently watching everything, but could see the argument escalating dangerously. "Michael," Richard continued, "who are these so-called investors who want to buy the company?" Michael hesitated before answering. "They're serious people, like I said. Serious people who just happen to include you." Michael's silence was all the confirmation Richard needed. "You set up a scheme to buy me out for $2.5 million on a company worth $8 million, didn't you? And you'll probably take the lion's share." "Richard, you're delusional. The accident affected your mind more than we thought." "My mind is perfectly clear, and so is my memory. I remember everything I discovered the day before the accident." Michael turned sharply. "What are you implying?" "You know exactly what I'm implying." The tension in the room was almost palpable. Emma held her grandfather's hand, trying to offer support. "Michael, you were like a son to me. When I started this company, you were just a fresh graduate. I taught you everything, made you a partner, trusted you to take care of what I built over a lifetime. And I did. I kept everything running while you wallowed in self-pity. Kept it running. For yourself," Richard shouted, and for the first time in years, he felt energy surge through his entire body. "You took advantage of my condition to rob me." Michael stepped closer to the wheelchair, his face red with anger. "You know what, Richard? You'll never walk again. Never work again. This company needs someone who can actually lead, not a paralyzed old man living in the past." The insult hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Emma stood up. "You have no right to speak to my grandfather like that." "Oh, I do, because I'm the one really in charge here now." At that moment, something extraordinary happened. Richard's anger was so intense he didn't even notice his muscles contracting involuntarily. Suddenly, he was pushing himself up from the wheelchair. Michael stopped mid-sentence, stunned. Emma gasped in shock. Richard stayed on his feet for only 3 seconds before his legs gave out and he collapsed back into the chair, but it was long enough to prove something had changed. How is this possible?" Michael stammered. Richard was breathless, but his eyes burned with a determination he hadn't felt in years. "Seems you were wrong about a lot of things, Michael." Without another word, Michael stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Emma knelt beside her grandfather's chair. "Grandpa, you stood up. How did that happen?" "I don't know," Richard said, still processing what had just occurred. "I was so angry. It felt like something woke up inside me. We have to tell Sarah and Olivia." "Yes, but first we need to deal with Michael. He won't stop here." On the way home, Richard was silent, turning over both Michael's betrayal and the fact that, even for just a few seconds, he had stood on his own feet again. When they arrived home, Sarah and Olivia were already waiting for the afternoon session. Emma recounted everything that had happened, and both were thrilled with Richard Thompson's physical progress. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, "what happened today proves your recovery is possible. The emotional stress may have been the trigger your body needed." Olivia stepped closer and took his hand. "Now we need to work, so this isn't just an isolated moment. Your body remembered how to stand. We need to make it remember how to walk." Richard nodded, but his mind was torn between hope for recovery and worry about Michael Reynolds. "Sarah, I need to ask you something. You once said a doctor named William Porter ruined your career. Is he friends with Michael?" "Not just friends, they're partners in a private rehab clinic. Why do you ask?" "Because now I understand why Michael never wanted me to try other physical therapy approaches. If I improved, he'd lose control over the company and over me." Olivia noticed the tension in Richard's voice. "Do you think they planned all this?" "I don't know if they planned the accident, but they certainly took advantage of it." Sarah grew thoughtful. "Mr. Thompson, there's something I need to tell you. When I learned I'd be working with you, I did some research. The accident you had happened right in front of Dr. Porter's clinic." "What do you mean?" "You were on your way to confront Michael and crashed just 2 blocks from his office. Dr. Porter was one of the first to arrive at the scene." A chill ran down Richard's spine. "Sarah, are you suggesting that—" "I'm not suggesting anything, just pointing out strange coincidences." Emma was pale. "Grandpa, This is getting really dangerous. What if they find out you're improving? They already know, Richard said grimly. Michael saw me standing today. That night, Richard barely slept. His mind swung between hope of walking again and fear of what Michael might do now that he knew about his progress. The next morning, Catherine received an unexpected call. It was a lawyer, she said after hanging up. Michael is challenging your mental competence and wants full control of the company. On what grounds? He claims you're suffering from paranoid delusions and aren't fit to make business decisions. Richard slammed his fist on the table. That bastard is trying to declare me incompetent. Sarah, who had arrived for the morning session, overheard. Mr. Thompson, this is more serious than we thought. If Michael proves you're not mentally sound, he could take guardianship of the company, even your medical decisions. What does that mean? It means he could ban any treatment he deems unsuitable, including our sessions. Olivia joined the group. We can't let that happen, not when you're so close to walking again. Emma had an idea. What if we get proof of Michael's misconduct in the company? If we show he's the untrustworthy one, maybe we can turn this around. How do we get that proof? Catherine asked. Brian and Deborah, Richard said. The employees he fired. They must know things that could help us. Sarah hesitated. Mr. Thompson, I need to be honest. If we fight this, it won't just be against Michael. Dr. Porter has a lot of influence in the medical community. He could make your lives very difficult. He already did that to you, Richard observed. And now I understand why. You were a threat to his business. Exactly. And now you are too. Olivia stood and walked to the window. You know what bothers me most? They all underestimated you. They underestimated you, underestimated my mother, underestimated me for being a child and blind. Where are you going with this, Olivia? I'm getting to the fact that this could be our advantage. They don't expect us to react, much less for you to recover. Richard smiled for the first time in days. You're right, Olivia. They were counting on me giving up. Then let's show them they were wrong, Emma said with determination. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing, the next day Emma managed to track down Brian, the company's former accountant. He agreed to meet them at a discreet cafe downtown. Brian was a serious but honest-looking man in his 50s. When he saw Richard arriving in a wheelchair, his eyes filled with tears. Mr. Thompson, I've missed you at the company. Things have changed a lot since you stepped away. Brian, I need your help. Michael is trying to have me declared incompetent and take full control of the company. Sir, I've been waiting for months for you to discover what's going on. So you know about the irregularities? Brian glanced around to make sure no one was listening. I know much more than just irregularities. Michael isn't just stealing from the company. He's using it to launder money from other sources. Richard felt his blood run cold. What other sources? Dr. Porter's clinic receives payments from insurance companies for treatments that were never performed. Michael uses Thompson Building Solutions to justify those transactions as consulting and specialized services. Emma was taking notes. Do you have proof of this? I have copies of all the documents. When Michael fired me, I already suspected it was to silence me. I backed everything up before leaving. Why didn't you report it sooner? Brian sighed. Because Michael threatened my family. He said if I spoke up, he'd frame me as part of the scheme, and I'd lose not just my job, but my freedom. Richard was processing the information. Brian, do you think the accident... Mr. Thompson, I can't say for sure, but the timing was very convenient for Michael. You were going to confront him with evidence of the theft, and then you had an accident right at the door of his partner's clinic. Sarah, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Mr. Thompson, this explains a lot, including why Dr. Porter was so determined to ruin my reputation. I might have uncovered irregularities at his clinic during my work. Olivia moved closer to Brian. Can you help us prove all this? I can, but I need guarantees that you'll protect me when this blows up. Richard looked at Brian with determination. Brian, you've known me for 15 years. Have I ever abandoned anyone who stood by me? Never, sir. Then trust me one more time. Brian agreed to hand over the evidence, but asked for a few days to organize everything. Meanwhile, Sarah intensified Richard's physical therapy sessions. "We need to speed up your recovery," she said. "If Michael gets medical guardianship, our sessions will be banned." The exercises became more intense. Olivia participated actively, using her sensitivity to touch to detect small improvements Sarah might miss. "Your right foot is responding better today," she observed during one session. "The circulation is more active." Sarah tested Olivia's observation and confirmed it. "She's right. Let's focus on exercises for that side." For an entire week, they worked tirelessly. Richard could move his toes more easily and felt tingling sensations more frequently. It was on a Thursday morning that the second miracle happened. During a strengthening exercise, Richard felt he could slightly bend his right knee. "Sarah, I'm moving, I'm really moving." This time the movement was voluntary and repeatable. Richard could bend and straighten his knee by a few degrees. Olivia clapped her hands in joy. "I knew it. I knew you could do it." But the celebration was interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Catherine, who was visibly shaken. "Dad, some court papers arrived. Michael got a preliminary injunction. A doctor is coming here tomorrow to evaluate your mental condition." Richard felt time was running out. "What doctor?" "Dr. William Porter." Sarah and Olivia exchanged worried glances. "That's no coincidence," Sarah said. "He'll do everything to declare you incompetent." "And if he succeeds?" "Michael takes full control of the company and your medical decisions, including the power to stop any treatment." Richard was determined. "Then we have to be ready for him. Sarah, do you think I can stand again if needed?" "I don't know." The anger that made you rise from the chair at the office was a very specific emotional trigger. Olivia had an idea. "What if we create a situation that sparks the same kind of emotion?" "How so?" "Well, Dr. Porter doesn't know you've discovered his connection to Michael. If we can make him talk too much, reveal things he shouldn't." Sarah understood the reasoning. Anger could be the stimulus your body needs to overcome the psychological barrier. "It's risky," Emma observed. "If it doesn't work, Grandpa might seem even more unstable." "And if it does?" "If it does, we prove I'm not only mentally capable but also physically recovering." Richard made his decision. "Let's do it." "Sarah, Olivia, can you stay here during the evaluation?" "I can," Sarah replied. "As a former physical therapist, I have the right to attend my patient's medical evaluation." "And I'll be here too," Olivia said. "After all, this is where it all began." The next morning, Dr. William Porter arrived promptly at 9. He was a tall man, around 60, with graying hair and an arrogant air that showed in every gesture. "Mr. Thompson," he said with a fake smile, "I'm Dr. Porter. I'm here to evaluate your current mental state." "Dr. Porter," Richard replied calmly, "I assume Michael told you about our disagreement." "Michael is worried about you. He mentioned some paranoid behavior and unfounded accusations." Sarah introduced herself. "Dr. Porter, I'm Sarah Thompson, the physical therapist overseeing Mr. Thompson's treatment." The doctor looked at her disdainfully. "Sarah Thompson. That name sounds familiar. Weren't your license revoked for unscientific practices?" "My license was suspended based on false accusations, but I still have the right to attend this evaluation." Olivia sat quietly in the corner of the room, but Richard noticed she was listening to every word. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Porter continued, "Michael told me you believe in conspiracy theories about him and me. Can you tell me about that?" Richard took a deep breath. "Doctor, have you known Michael for long?" "Yes, we have. We're partners in some business ventures." "What kind of ventures?" "Various investments. Why do you ask?" "Because I've discovered he's been diverting money from my company to fund these various investments." Dr. Porter smiled condescendingly. "Mr. Thompson, accusations like these are typical of paranoid behavior. Do you have any proof of these claims?" "I do. Brian Adams, our former accountant, has documents that prove everything." "Brian Adams." Dr. Porter grew visibly uncomfortable. "That name sounds familiar to me, too." Olivia stood up and walked over to where the doctor was sitting. "You know a lot of people, don't you, doctor?" "What do you mean, child?" "Well, you know Michael, You know Brian, you know my mom. It's almost like everyone who discovers inconvenient things ends up having problems with you. Dr. Porter was clearly irritated. Young lady, you're interfering with an official medical evaluation. I'm sorry, Olivia said innocently. It's just that I don't understand one thing. If you're such a respected doctor, why did you have to ruin my mom's career? Was she competing with you? Sarah tried to interrupt, but Richard signaled for her to let Olivia continue. And another strange thing, Olivia went on. Why did you show up so quickly at Mr. Richard's accident site? It's almost like you were waiting. Enough, Dr. Porter exploded. I won't tolerate insinuations from a rude child. Doctor, Richard said calmly, she's just asking questions. If they bother you so much, maybe it's because there's something to hide. There's nothing to hide. Michael called me because he was worried about your delusions. And as for the accident, it was a coincidence. A very convenient coincidence, Olivia murmured. Dr. Porter stood up from his chair, clearly losing control. Mr. Thompson, it's obvious you're suffering from severe paranoia and influencing this child with your fantasies. I'll recommend immediate psychiatric hospitalization. That's when anger took over Richard. The same energy he'd felt in Michael's office came back in full force. Dr. Porter, he said, suddenly rising from his chair, the only sick person here is you. Dr. Porter froze at the sight of Richard standing. This is impossible. Impossible? Richard took a shaky but determined step forward. Or inconvenient for your plans? Sarah moved closer to support him, but Richard kept speaking as he struggled to stay on his feet. For years, you've made money keeping patients dependent, destroying alternative treatments that actually worked. My physical therapist, he glanced at Sarah, was slandered because she was a threat to your business. Mr. Thompson, sit down immediately. The strain could what? Cure me? Richard took another step. That's what you're afraid of, isn't it? That I'll recover, that I'll go back to work, that I'll uncover all the corruption you've built behind my back. Olivia was beaming with joy, but stayed focused on the situation. Dr. Porter, you seem very nervous. Shouldn't you be happy to see a patient improving? Dr. Porter was completely flustered. Every claim he'd made about Richard's incapacity was being disproven right before his eyes. This doesn't change the fact that you're making baseless accusations. Baseless? Richard leaned on the armrest but remained standing. Brian Adams will hand over all the evidence of fraud tomorrow. Documents showing how you used my company to launder money from the clinic. That's absurd. Absurd. Then you wouldn't mind if the authorities investigated? Dr. Porter was visibly sweating. Michael was right. You're delusional. Michael was right about what? Olivia asked innocently. About the accident happening at just the right time. About you keeping Mr. Richard away from the company. About no one suspecting your dealings. I never said any of that. You didn't have to, Sarah cut in. Your reaction says it all. Dr. Porter realized he'd walked into a trap. His medical evaluation had turned into an interrogation, and he'd come out looking more suspicious than the supposed patient. This evaluation is over, he said, picking up his briefcase. I'll recommend that Michael seeks other legal means to resolve this situation. Doctor, Richard said, now leaning fully on the armchair but still standing, before you leave, could you note in your report that the patient demonstrated the ability to stand and walk during the evaluation? That means nothing. It could just be a muscle spasm. A spasm that lasted 5 minutes and allowed me to have a lucid conversation. Richard smiled. I'm sure other doctors will have a different opinion than yours. Dr. Porter left the house slamming the door, but everyone knew the victory had been theirs. As soon as the doctor left, Richard sat back down in the chair, exhausted but triumphant. We did it! Olivia shouted, running to hug him. You sure did, Mr. Thompson, Sarah said, checking his vitals. Not only did you prove you're mentally capable, but you also showed significant physical improvement. Emma was euphoric. Grandpa, you stood for almost 10 minutes, and you spoke so clearly I never imagined it was possible. Anger gave me strength, Richard admitted, but it also gave me clarity. Now I know exactly how we'll deal with Michael. The next day, Brian arrived with a folder full of documents proving all the irregularities. Besides the embezzlement at Thompson Building Solutions, There was evidence that Dr. Porter's clinic billed for non-existent treatments and that Michael facilitated laundering that money through the company. With this evidence, Brian said, we can not only reverse the guardianship attempt, but also sue Michael for fraud and embezzlement. Richard studied the documents carefully. Brian, is there anything here about the day of my accident? There is. Michael had scheduled a meeting with Dr. Porter exactly when you were going to confront him. It's almost like they were expecting it, Olivia finished. Sarah grew thoughtful. Mr. Thompson, do you remember exactly how the accident happened? I remember being very upset, driving maybe faster than I should have. When I saw the truck coming in the opposite direction, I tried to swerve, but it was like my steering wheel locked. Locked? Yes. For a few seconds, I couldn't turn the wheel to the right. Brian looked through the documents again. Mr. Thompson, there's a note here about repairs to your car. Michael authorized maintenance a week before the accident. What kind of maintenance? Steering system. It says here it was preventive. Everyone fell silent, processing the implication. Do you think they... Emma began to ask. We can't prove anything about the accident, Sarah said carefully. But we can prove all the other irregularities. Richard made a decision. We'll turn everything over to the IRS and the district attorney. Let them investigate what they can. 2 weeks later, Michael was arrested in the act trying to transfer a large sum to an offshore account. The investigation revealed the full scheme. Dr. Porter's clinic billed for phantom treatments. Michael laundered the money through Thompson Building Solutions, and they split the profits. Dr. Porter was also indicted and had his medical license permanently revoked. Throughout this time, Richard continued his sessions with Sarah, and the progress was remarkable. He could now stand for over half an hour and take a few steps with support. Olivia was right from the start, Sarah said during a session. Your body knew it could recover, it just needed emotional motivation and the right treatment. And most of all, Olivia added, it needed hope. 3 months after their first meeting at the hospital, Richard managed to walk from the living room to the kitchen without any support. It was a short distance, but it represented a monumental victory. Olivia couldn't see her steps, but she heard each one with a huge smile on her face. I knew it, she said. From the first moment I touched your hand, I knew. Sarah had regained her reputation and officially returned to work as a physical therapist. Several of Dr. Porter's former patients sought her treatment, and she was developing a rehabilitation center with innovative methods. Mr. Thompson, she said, I'd like to make a proposal. What proposal? How about using some of the money recovered from the company to build a rehabilitation center? A place where people like you can access treatments traditional medicine considers impossible. Richard smiled. Sarah, I think that's the best idea I've heard in a long time. And I can help. Olivia perked up. I can teach other patients that sometimes feeling is more important than seeing. 6 months later, the Olivia Rehabilitation Center opened its doors. It was a modern, accessible building where patients deemed hopeless by traditional medicine found a second chance. Richard walked through the center's halls, still with some difficulty, but completely independent. Sarah led the physical therapy department, and Olivia, though still a child, had become a sort of emotional consultant for the patients. Mr. Thompson, said a new patient who had just arrived, the doctors told me I'd never move my right arm again after my stroke. Richard stopped and looked at her with understanding. You know what? A year ago, doctors told me I'd never get out of this wheelchair. He pointed to the empty chair beside her. Sometimes doctors are wrong. Sometimes the body knows things medicine hasn't discovered yet. Olivia approached and took the woman's hand. And sometimes, she said with her childlike wisdom, we just need someone to believe in us when we don't even believe in ourselves. The woman looked at Olivia, then at Richard walking down the hall, and for the first time in months, felt something she'd lost. Hope. Go on and move your arm again, Olivia said gently. I can feel that you can do it. Richard smiled, hearing the words that changed his life now being used to change someone else's. At the end of the day, as the center was closing, Richard, Sarah, and Olivia walked out together through the parking lot. Richard moved slowly, but steadily. Olivia held Sarah's hand with one of hers and lightly touched Richard's arm with the other. "Mr. Thompson," Olivia said, "do you remember what I told you at the hospital? That sometimes we can feel things other people don't notice." "I do. I can feel something new in you now." "What do you feel?" Olivia stopped walking and smiled. "I feel like you're whole again. Not just in your legs, but in here." She touched her own chest. "You've become who you always were." Richard knelt beside Olivia, balancing carefully. "Olivia, if you hadn't shown up that day—" "But I did," she interrupted, "because sometimes life puts the right people in the right place at the right time. My mum always says there are no coincidences, just opportunities in disguise." Sarah was moved to hear her own words echoed by her daughter. "Olivia's right. You two found each other because you needed each other. You needed hope, and Olivia needed to see that her special abilities could truly help people." "And I needed to learn," Richard said, standing again, "that strength and determination don't come from the absence of problems, but from the ability to overcome them." The three walked toward the car, but Olivia stopped once more. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course. Do you still get angry when you remember what Michael and the doctor did?" Richard thought for a moment. "You know, Olivia, I've learned something. Anger gave me the strength to get up, but it was forgiveness that gave me the strength to keep walking." "What do you mean?" "Anger is like a very strong medicine. It can heal, but if you take too much, it can poison you. Forgiveness is like physical therapy for the heart." Olivia smiled. "So you've forgiven them?" "I have. Not because they deserve it, but because I deserve to live without carrying that weight." Sarah opened the car door for Olivia. "Mr. Thompson, this is the greatest proof that your recovery is complete. When we can forgive those who hurt us, it's a sign that we're stronger than the pain they caused." Before getting into the car, Olivia turned to Richard one last time. "Thank you for believing in me when I said you could walk again. Thank you for believing in me when even I didn't." They hugged, and in that moment, two people who had met at rock bottom discovered that together they could reach any height. Sarah's car drove away slowly, but Richard remained in the parking lot for a few more minutes, looking at the rehabilitation center building. Tomorrow would be another day of helping people realize that limits exist to be overcome, not accepted. He walked to his own car, driving alone for the first time since the accident. As he drove home, Richard thought about how much life had changed since that morning in the hospital when a blind girl told him he could walk again. She was right. But what Olivia didn't know back then was that she hadn't just helped him regain the ability to walk, she'd helped him regain the ability to live. When he got home, Emma and Catherine were in the living room, watching TV. Seeing him walk in normally, they still smiled with the same surprise and joy as always. "How was your day at the center, Grandpa?" "It was a good day, Emma. We helped 3 people take their first steps after accidents, and one woman moved her arm for the first time in 6 months. Don't you ever get tired of seeing things like that?" Catherine asked. "Never," Richard answered. "Every person who overcomes their limits reminds me that it's worth fighting." That night before bed, Richard opened his nightstand drawer and took out a photo he'd recently printed. It was a picture of him, Sarah, and Olivia on the day the center opened. Olivia stood between them, holding both their hands with a radiant smile. He looked at the photo and murmured, "Thank you, Olivia, for teaching me that sometimes we have to lose everything to discover what we're truly capable of." Across town, Olivia was in her room, doing her homework in Braille. Sarah came in to say goodnight. "Olivia, are you happy with what we've built?" Olivia stopped writing and smiled. "Very happy, Mom, but do you know what makes me happiest?" "What?" "Knowing that when I told Mr. Thompson he could walk again, I wasn't lying. I truly felt he could do it." "And how did you know?" Olivia thought for a moment before answering. "Because he had the same strength you taught me to have when I lost my sight. The strength not to let a physical limitation define who we are." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. "You're a very wise girl, Olivia." "I'm not wise, Mom. I just learned that sometimes we see better when we close our eyes and use our hearts." The next morning, Richard arrived early at the rehabilitation center. He liked being the first one there, so he could walk the empty halls and reflect on the miracle his life had become. But that morning, when he opened the main door, he found a surprise. There was a person sitting at the reception, a man around 40 years old in a wheelchair, accompanied by a teenager who appeared to be his daughter. "Excuse me," the man said when he saw Richard. "I know you don't open until 8, but we arrived early because we traveled all the way from Miami. My name is Stephen Collins." Richard approached. "No problem at all, Stephen. I'm Richard Thompson, one of the founders of the center. How can I help you?" "Mr. Thompson, I heard about your case through a doctor friend. I had an accident 2 years ago, and the doctors said I'd never walk again. But when I found out you had recovered here," Stephen's daughter interrupted. "Dad heard there's a girl here who can sense special things. Is that true?" Richard smiled. "Yes, it's true. Olivia has a very special gift for helping people discover their own strength." "Do you think she could evaluate me?" Stephen asked, a mix of hope and skepticism in his voice. "I'm sure she can, but while we wait for her to arrive, why don't we talk a little? I'd like to understand your situation better." Stephen explained he had been injured in a construction accident. He had 2 daughters and was dealing not only with physical limitations, but also financial struggles and depression. "Mr. Thompson, I don't want to give my family false hope, but I can't give up trying either. Stephen, can I tell you something? A year ago, I was exactly where you are now. Hopeless, with no prospects, feeling like a burden to my family. What changed? A 10-year-old girl came up to me and said I could walk again. At first, I thought it was crazy, but she insisted so much with such conviction that I decided to believe her." Stephen's daughter stepped closer. "And it worked." Richard stood up from his chair and took a few steps in front of them. "What do you think?" Stephen's jaw dropped. How? How is that possible?" "It's possible because I learned that the line between possible and impossible is sometimes just in our minds. The body can heal in ways medicine doesn't fully understand yet." Just then, Sarah and Olivia arrived at the center. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," Olivia greeted cheerfully. "Who are our visitors?" "Olivia, I'd like you to meet Stephen and his daughter. They came all the way from Miami seeking help." Olivia walked up to Stephen and stopped in front of his wheelchair. "May I hold your hand?" Stephen hesitated for a moment, but extended his hand. Olivia held it gently and stayed silent for a few seconds. "Interesting," she murmured. "What is it?" Stephen asked anxiously. "You're different from the other patients I've met." "Different how?" Olivia smiled. "You haven't completely lost the connection to your legs. It's like there's a very thin thread still attached, but no one noticed." Sarah stepped forward to do her own assessment. "Stephen, may I run some tests?" Over the next half hour, Sarah conducted a series of exams the doctors in Miami had never done. Her findings confirmed Olivia's intuition. "Stephen, there are signs of residual electrical activity in your spine. It's very faint, but it's there." "What does that mean?" "It means Olivia is right. You're not completely disconnected. With the right work, we may be able to restore some function." Stephen's daughter began to cry with emotion. "Dad, did you hear? You can get better." Stephen was in shock. But the doctors in Miami were so certain." "Stephen," Richard interjected, "can I give you some advice? It doesn't matter what the doctors said. What matters is what you feel, what Olivia sensed and what Sarah can do for you. But I don't have the money for private treatment." "Who said anything about paying?" Olivia asked, surprised. "Here we help people because they need it, not because they can pay." Sarah explained that the center operated on donations and that part of the funding came from the profits of Richard's company. "Our mission is to help people traditional medicine has given up on. Money has never been and never will be an obstacle." Stephen spent the next 3 days at the center, staying in a small apartment they had built specifically for patients from other cities. Olivia attended every session, offering her unique observations. On the 3rd day, during an electrical stimulation exercise, Stephen felt the first tingling in his right leg. "Sarah, Olivia, I felt something. It was the beginning of a recovery that would take months, but would prove once again that Olivia had a special gift for seeing possibilities where others saw only limitations." 6 months later, Stephen took his first steps. It wasn't a full recovery like Richard's, but it was enough for him to return to work and regain his self-esteem. "Olivia," he said on the day he was discharged, "how do you do it? How do you notice things doctors don't?" Olivia thought for a moment. "I think when you lose something important like I lost my sight, you learn to use the other things you have better. I learned to feel with my hands, to listen with my heart, to sense energy with my soul." "So that's not a gift?" "Maybe it is. Or maybe I just pay attention to things other people overlook." Stephen smiled. "Whatever it is, you changed my life." "No," Olivia corrected. "You changed your own life. I just helped you see that you could." That conversation stayed in Richard's mind for days. He began reflecting on how many people across the country were in similar situations, written off by medicine, without access to alternative treatments, without hope. One evening during dinner, he shared his idea with the family. "I'm thinking of expanding the center, creating a network across the whole country." "Grandpa, that would be wonderful," Emma said excitedly. "But wouldn't it be too expensive?" "Emma, the company has been doing very well since I got rid of Michael. And besides, it's not just about money, it's about starting a movement." Catherine was intrigued. "What kind of movement?" "A movement of people who refuse to accept limitations as final. Patients, physical therapists, doctors, families, all working together to redefine what's possible." Sarah, who had been invited to dinner, liked the idea. "Mr. Thompson, this could help thousands of people, but it would also face resistance from traditional medicine." "Resistance? What we're doing isn't against traditional medicine, it's complementary. We're working with cases they themselves considered impossible." Olivia, who had been playing with her food, suddenly spoke up. "You know what would be great? If we could teach others to feel what I feel." Everyone looked at her. "What do you mean, Olivia?" "Well, I've always thought anyone could do what I do. Maybe people just need to learn how to pay attention differently." Sarah grew thoughtful. "Olivia might be right. Maybe her sensitivity isn't unique. Maybe it's something that can be developed." "Are you talking about creating a school?" Emma asked. "Not exactly a school," Richard said, envisioning the idea. "More like a research and training institute. A place where we'd develop new rehabilitation methods based on combining traditional science with more intuitive insights." Olivia clapped her hands. "I'd love to teach others. Imagine how many people we could help." The idea took shape in the following weeks. Richard reached out to universities, progressive doctors, and other physical therapists who had been marginalized for unconventional methods. To her surprise, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Many professionals were frustrated with the limitations of traditional medicine and eager to explore alternative approaches. 3 months later, the National Institute for Advanced Rehabilitation was born, headquartered in Denver with plans to expand to New York, Los Angeles, Miami, and San Diego. Olivia, at just 11 years old, became the youngest consultant at a medical research institute in the country. Her official title was Tactile Perception and Intuitive Evaluation Specialist. "Olivia," Richard said on the day of the institute's grand opening, "do you have any idea what you've accomplished?" "Accomplished?" she laughed. "Mr. Thompson, I didn't accomplish anything. We did this together. But it all started with you telling me I could walk again, and you believing me, and my mother risking her career, and Emma supporting us, and even Michael Reynolds and Dr. Porter in their own strange way helped." "How so?" "If they hadn't been so awful, you wouldn't have been so angry, and that anger gave you the strength to get out of your chair." Richard chuckled. "Olivia, you have a very unique way of seeing things. That's because when you can't see with your eyes, you learn to see with your heart, and the heart always finds the good in everything." The opening ceremony was attended by hundreds, recovered patients, family members, doctors, local officials, and the press. The most emotional moment came when Richard took the stage to deliver the keynote speech. He walked unassisted to the microphone, met with thunderous applause. "2 years ago," he began, "I was convinced my life was over. I believed physical limitations meant limitations in every other way. Then a 10-year-old girl told me something that changed everything. Go and walk again." She didn't say it like a doctor giving a diagnosis. She said it as someone who believed in me more than I believed in myself. Olivia sat in the front row, holding Sarah's hand, beaming. Today, this institute exists because we've learned that the impossible is just the possible waiting for the right opportunity. We're here to create those opportunities. But before I talk about the future, I want to acknowledge those who made this possible. First, my family, who never stopped believing in me. Second, Sarah Thompson, who risked her career to help me when no one else would try. And finally, Olivia Thompson, who taught me that sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from the youngest, and that limitations exist to be overcome, not accepted. The applause was deafening. Olivia stood and waved to the crowd, visibly moved. The National Institute for Advanced Rehabilitation, Richard continued, isn't just a treatment center. It's a symbol that we should never accept no as the final answer when it comes to reclaiming our dignity and our ability to dream. After the speech, many approached Olivia to talk. Among them was a woman in her 60s who caught her attention. Olivia, my name is Margaret. My husband had a stroke 3 years ago and lost the ability to speak. The doctors say he'll never communicate normally again. Do you think it's possible? Olivia took Margaret's hand. Where is he? He's here with me, over there in the wheelchair. Olivia asked to be led to the man. When she reached him, she gently held his hand. Anthony, she said softly. The man looked at her but didn't respond. Anthony, I know you're in there. I can feel it. She held his hand in silence for several minutes. Margaret, she finally said, bring your husband tomorrow for an evaluation with my mother. There's something different about him. Different how? He didn't lose the ability to speak. He lost the confidence that someone would listen. Margaret began to cry. How can you know that? Because when I held his hand, I felt him squeeze back ever so slightly. He's trying to communicate, but no one's really paying attention. The next day, Anthony and Margaret arrived at the institute for the evaluation. Sarah conducted several brain function tests and discovered Olivia was right. Anthony's speech ability wasn't entirely gone. With specific speech therapy exercises combined with Olivia's tactile perception, within 2 weeks, Anthony managed to say his first words in 3 years. The first word he spoke was, "Thank you," looking directly at Olivia. Cases like this became routine at the institute. Patients arrived with little hope and left with at least significant improvement, if not full recovery. The media began taking interest in Olivia's work, and soon she became nationally known as the girl who sees with her hands. But all this attention started to bother Olivia. "Mum," she said one evening, "I don't like it when people call me special or different. I'm just doing what anyone could do if they paid attention. Why does that upset you? Because when people think I have some supernatural gift, they stop trying to do the same. It's like they're putting all the responsibility on me." Sarah understood her daughter's point. "What would you like to do?" "I'd like to teach others how to do what I do. Show them it's not magic, it's just attention." This conversation led to the creation of the Institute's first Advanced Tactile Perception course. Olivia, though still a child, became the lead instructor. The first group of students included doctors, physical therapists, nurses, and even patients' family members. Olivia taught simple techniques for focus, breathing, and sensory awareness. To everyone's surprise, several students developed sensitivities similar to hers, though not at the same level. "See?" Olivia said during a practical lesson. "Anyone can do this, it's just a matter of practice and belief." Dr. Robert, a neurologist taking the course, was amazed. "Olivia, you're literally creating a new medical specialty." "I'm not creating anything new," she replied. "I'm just reminding people of something they already knew but forgot." A year after the Institute's opening, the results were astounding. Over 300 patients had been treated, with an 80% significant improvement rate. The Institute became a national benchmark for advanced rehabilitation, and universities abroad began expressing interest in partnerships. But for Richard, the most important result was personal. Not only had he regained his ability to walk, but he'd rediscovered his purpose in life. One morning, he was strolling through the Institute's gardens when he found Olivia sitting under a tree, doing homework. Olivia, may I sit here with you? Of course, Mr. Richard. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the cool morning breeze. Olivia, do you regret anything? What do you mean? Approaching me that day at the hospital, insisting I could walk, changing your whole life because of a stranger. Olivia laughed. Mr. Richard, do you think my life changed because of you? Didn't it? My life changed because I learned that when we help others, we help ourselves too. When I said you could walk, I was trying to help you, but the one who helped herself most was me. How so? Before I met you, I felt different, isolated, like my blindness separated me from the rest of the world. When I realized I could use this difference to help people, I understood that I'm not disabled. I'm special in a useful way. Richard was moved. Olivia, you're 12 years old and already wiser than most adults I know. I'm not wise, Mr. Thompson. I just pay attention to simple things that most people overcomplicate. For example, everyone wants to feel useful. Everyone wants to believe they can overcome their limitations. Everyone wants to be seen as more than their problems. And when we offer that to others, they flourish. It's like planting a seed. If you take good care of it, any seed can grow into a beautiful tree. Richard looked around the institute, watching patients walking in the gardens, therapists working with dedication, families gathered in renewed hope. Olivia, you're right. This place is like a giant garden where we plant hope and harvest miracles. They're not miracles, Mr. Thompson, Olivia corrected with a smile. They're just people discovering they were stronger than they thought. 2 years after the institute's opening, Olivia was celebrating her 14th birthday. The party was held at the institute itself, attended by hundreds of patients she had helped. During the celebration, a journalist from a national magazine asked for an interview. Olivia, you're considered a medical phenomenon. How does it feel to be so young and already have helped so many people? I don't feel like a phenomenon, she replied. I feel like a normal person who was lucky enough to find something I love doing. But your abilities aren't normal. Yes, they are. Everyone has the capacity to notice more than they do. Everyone can develop greater sensitivity. I just had to develop mine because I couldn't rely on sight. What's your biggest dream for the future? Olivia thought for a moment. My biggest dream is that one day, what we do here will be so normal that places like this won't be needed anymore. That every hospital, every clinic, every doctor will know that physical limitations aren't limits to life. And personally, what dreams do you have for your own life? I want to study medicine and specialize in neurology. I want to understand scientifically why the techniques we've developed work. And I want to keep helping people discover their own strength. After the interview, Richard approached Olivia. Medicine? Since when have you wanted to study medicine? Always. I just never said anything because I thought people would think it was presumptuous. Olivia, after everything you've already achieved, studying medicine would be presumptuous. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I already know too much for my age, you know? Like I'm skipping steps. Richard knelt in front of her. Olivia, can I tell you a secret? Of course. When I was your age, I also thought I knew too much. I believed I was ready to conquer the world. And in a way, I was. And then? Then I realized there's no such thing as knowing too much or being too ready. The only thing that matters is having the courage to try. And you, my dear, have more courage than anyone I know. Olivia smiled. So you think I should really study medicine? I think you should study what makes you happy. If it's medicine, great. If it's something else, also great. What matters is that you keep being who you are. And who am I? You're someone who sees possibilities where others see impossibilities. Someone who believes in people more than they believe in themselves. Someone who turns limitations into superpowers. Olivia laughed. Superpowers? Yes, your superpower is helping others discover their own. That night, after everyone had left, Richard stayed alone at the institute, walking through the quiet halls. He stopped in front of a photo on the wall, an image of him and Olivia on the day they met at the hospital, recreated months later for a news feature. In the photo, Olivia was holding his hand, both smiling. Below the photo, a plaque read, "Go and walk again where it all began." Richard looked at the photo and murmured, "Thank you, Olivia. for teaching me that walking isn't just about moving your legs. It's about moving life forward, no matter the obstacles. Across town, Olivia was in her room studying for a math test. Sarah came in to say goodnight. "How was your birthday, sweetheart?" "It was perfect, Mom. But you know what made me happiest?" "What?" "Seeing Mr. Thompson doing so well, so fulfilled with the Institute. Remember when we first met him? He seemed like he'd given up on everything." "I do remember. And you, even though you were just a child, saw something in him he couldn't see himself." "I didn't see anything special, Mom. I just felt he was too strong to stay down forever." "And now?" "Now I know I was right. But I also know if I hadn't said anything, someone else would have come into his life. Because people like Mr. Thompson find a way to get back up, no matter how many times they fall." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. "Olivia, do you realize how many lives you've changed?" "Mom, I haven't changed any lives. I've just helped people change their own." "What's the difference?" "The difference is when you change your own life, the change is real. When someone changes it for you, it might only be temporary." "And do you think the changes we've seen are real?" Olivia smiled. "I'm sure of it, because I watched each person fight for them." 5 years had passed since Richard and Olivia first met. The National Institute for Advanced Rehabilitation had expanded to 16 US cities, partnered with 3 international universities, and Olivia had become the youngest person in the country to receive an honorary doctorate in medicine. But to them, external success mattered less than the friendship they'd built. Every Friday, without fail, they met to walk together through the gardens of the original institute in Denver. It was a ritual they'd kept since the institute's first year. On one of these walks, Richard shared something that stunned Olivia. "Olivia, there's something I've never told anyone." "What is it?" "The day we met at the hospital, I wasn't there for a medical appointment." Olivia stopped walking. "What do you mean?" "I was there to speak with a psychiatrist. I was thinking about giving up on everything." Olivia felt the weight of his words. "Mr. Thompson, I'd lost all hope. I thought I was useless, just a burden to my family. And then I showed up. And then you showed up, a blind 10-year-old girl who told me I could walk again. At the time, I thought it was fate being cruel, a child giving false hope to a desperate old man." Olivia held his hand. "But it wasn't false." "No, it wasn't. But even if it had been, you know what happened? For the first time in months, someone looked at me and saw possibilities instead of limitations. That gave me the strength to hold on for one more day, and then another, and another, until those days turned into recovery." "Exactly. Olivia, you didn't just give me the ability to walk again, you gave me the will to want to walk again." Olivia was moved. "Mr. Thompson, can I share a secret too?" "Of course." "That day at the hospital, I was sad too. I'd fought with my mum because she'd lost another job because of Dr. Porter's campaign against her." "Were you blaming yourself?" "I was. I used to think that if I weren't blind, my mother wouldn't have had to work so much, wouldn't have specialized in rehabilitation, wouldn't have had conflicts with other doctors. And then you saw me. And then I saw you. A man who seemed to be suffering even more than I was. When I touched your hand and felt all that pain, all that pent-up anger, I thought if I can help him, maybe I'm not a burden in people's lives. Maybe I'm a solution." Richard stopped walking and turned to Olivia. "So we saved each other that day?" "I think so. The difference is you thought I saved you and I thought you saved me. The truth is, we saved each other together." They continued walking in silence for a few minutes, reflecting on the journey they'd shared. "Olivia," Richard finally said, "do you remember the exact words you said to me that first day?" "I do. I said, go and walk again." "Why did you choose those exact words?" Olivia thought for a moment. "Because I didn't want to say, you will walk again. That would have been a promise I couldn't make. I said, go and walk, like a request, like encouragement, as if I were giving you permission to try." "Permission?" "Yes. Sometimes people need someone to give them permission to try to be happy again." Richard smiled. "Olivia, you're right. I was waiting for someone to give me permission to try again." And I was waiting for someone to give me permission to be useful. So that's what we did for each other, we gave permission. They reached a bench at the end of the garden where they always ended their walks. It was the same bench where they'd sat the first time Richard had managed to walk there on his own. "Mr. Richard," Olivia said as they sat down, "if you could go back in time, would you change anything? About my recovery? About the institute? About meeting you?" "About everything." Richard thought carefully before answering. "You know what? I wouldn't change a thing. Not even the accident, not even Michael's betrayal, not even the 3 years in a wheelchair. Why? Because all of it brought me to you. And meeting you brought me to who I really am. And who are you, really? I'm someone who believes every limitation is temporary, that every fall is a chance to rise stronger, that every person has more strength inside them than they realize." Olivia smiled. "You know something? You just described me too." "How so?" "I also believe limitations are temporary. My blindness taught me to see things sighted people can't. My difference became my strength." "Then we're alike." "We are. The difference is, it took you 70 years to figure that out, and I learned it at 10. They laughed together. "Olivia, thank you." "For what?" "For coming into my life when I needed it most. For believing in me when even I didn't. For teaching me that age doesn't matter when it comes to wisdom. For showing me that helping others is the best way to help yourself." Olivia held Richard's hand. "Mr. Richard, thank you." "For what?" "For giving me the chance to discover I could make a difference in people's lives. For teaching me that good intentions only work when paired with action. For showing me it's possible to build something good from something bad." They sat quietly, watching other patients from the institute walking through the gardens, some with walkers, others with canes, some struggling, others moving more easily, but all of them walking. "Olivia," Richard finally said, "do you know the most amazing thing about our story?" "What?" "It doesn't end. Every person we help here will go on to help others out there. Every life we change will change other lives." "Like ripples in water." "Exactly. A stone thrown into the lake creates ripples that reach the shore." Olivia stood up from the bench. "Then let's keep throwing stones, Mr. Richard." "Yes, Olivia. Let's keep believing that everyone can walk again, no matter where they've fallen." They walked back to the institute where another day of work awaited them, more lives to touch, more limitations to overcome. But this time, they weren't just walking as the man who regained his ability to walk and the girl who helped him. They walked as two friends who had discovered that the real miracle isn't in overcoming physical limitations, but in overcoming the limitations of the soul. And as they walked, Olivia whispered the words that had changed everything. "Go and walk again," and Richard replied, "I'm already walking, and I'll keep walking forever." End of story. Now we want to know, what did you think of this inspiring story? Do you believe Olivia made a difference in Richard's life? Or did he find the strength to recover on his own? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.